I'm Arthur Mrozowski. I'm based in Silicon Valley for the last 35 years, off the boat from Poland, like 40 some odd years. But I've been dealing with the startups and some successes, some not. But recently, I've been investing a little bit in life science, healthcare, and helping Marty navigating some of the panels. So I'm really privileged to be with you guys remotely. I wish I could be in New York, although I see it's like a little bit cloudy. But in any event, we have a little bit of change in the panel.
Oh, that's right.
We were supposed to.
You can see the background.
Yeah. Anyways, we had previously had David that could not join us, David Dalton, and then he is replaced with Eric Singer, and then we also have the Steve Katz, president of Stephen Katz and Associates, and I'll let Stephen talk a little bit about himself. What it is that he does, and then I'd like to move on to Eric.
Okay, thank you. Eric and I worked on a transaction a couple of years ago, and we just reconnected about 30 minutes ago on the transaction. We had a very interesting discussion. So it's very nice and refreshing to see that happen, and what we discussed 6 years ago pretty much took place. So we're going to revisit what needs to get done. In any event, I'm a management consultant in the healthcare space. I've been running my own healthcare consulting firm for 39 years. Prior experience was with Pricewaterhouse, Revlon, Citigroup. I completed 80 licenses in the healthcare space, about 70 raises. I've been on 27 boards, public and private, reverse mergers, NASDAQ companies, bigger companies. I sit on a pretty big SPAC board right now. And I do diligence on transactions. I advise companies in the early intermediate stage on strategy. We prepare materials for raises. I do raises. I've run 14 turnarounds in the last 42 years, all primarily in the healthcare space around the world, biotechs, devices, so on and so forth. Get calls from anybody and everybody and work with anybody and everybody. And that's basically what I do. Your turn.
Well, I will overcome my fundamental shyness and try to say something about myself. I will just say in passing that Steve stuck in my mind from the time that we had worked together. I thought he was unusually direct, honest, and accurate about what he had to say for clients. So I heartily endorse Steve's ability to talk to the issues. My background is I've been an investment banker for the last 40 years with a focus on biotech for the last 10. I will talk a little bit about a company called Neotix, which I've raised $86 million for over to get them to be a phase 2 company. And I'm not a scientist, and I don't have depth of relationship in the biotech community. I basically just I think of myself as kind of a cancer slut. I will talk to anybody about cancer and the potential implications for the companies that I work with. From time to time, I do bring other kinds of deals that are not cancer deals, but biotech deals. I recently completed a funding for a periodontal company with a technology out of Yale University. So that's my hurry up background.
Oh, very nice, very nice. I'd say that we have a panel that it's more on the advisory role, and then have a deep experience in the healthcare, biotech, life science, and all that, but more on the business side of the things than scientific. Which actually, the healthcare right now has a number of different issues that you guys are trying to solve by, providing your services and monies to the group of whatever the emerging needs is. So I'd like to start with Stephen. You've been sitting on the boards of a lot of different companies, and as I understand, so if you could tell us more about what is the highest interest in terms of investing in any of the multiplicity of the verticals in healthcare?
Where I see by far the greatest level of interest in the healthcare life sciences space that encompasses devices, diagnostics, biotech, so on and so forth, where I see the hottest areas of interest are in the following order: AI, robotics, and what I call, and what some people call, navigation. And so that's a general term. And what that means is, if you want to place a hip in a surgical theater into a human being, if you've ever seen the automotive commercial for Safelite Auto Glass, they have a little lever and they place that windshield exactly where they need to be. So that's navigation in an oversimplified sense. So the big areas, and there are other big areas, but from a macro level and from a general point of view, those are the three hottest. AI being a very significant number one, robotics being a distant number two, but significant, and navigation being a number three in logical order. There are other areas in different subspecialties that one could say are bigger priorities, but that would be what I would say based on discussions with VCs, hedge funds, clients, traffic pattern of what goes across my desk.
Sounds good. Well, Eric, sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead and
Forgive me.
I'm pretty sure it's important then you were called in last minute.
I've taken care of it. Everything's under control.
Right on. So can you tell us, you've pretty much invested or raised about $62 million to this company, Neotech. Can you tell us what that company is all about?
Yeah, so it was $86 million. Neotech's was a team that was put together to look for failed drugs. It included and still includes a Nobel laureate, Roger Kornberg, Marcel Rosenzweig, who was the head of oncology at Bristol Myers and the godfather of chemo, and Asher Nathan, who brought them together as the CEO. We looked at 150 failed drugs to see which ones could be repurposed with immunotherapy, and we found a drug that we thought had been completely mistested. The name of the drug is naptumomab efstafenitox, and for panel purposes, I'll make it pretty short. We take a fragment of Staphylococcus and we use a piece of Velcro to stick it on the surface of tumors. We coat the surface of the tumors, and then the body thinks it has a bacterial infection. They have some much more robust immune response. There was a problem with the drug with anti-drug antibodies, and so the prior developer had spent $230 million on it, didn't know how to test it, didn't know how to deal with that problem. We got it for $250,000 and have taken it to phase 2. We're in the middle of a phase 2 where so far the preliminary results look, we're working on patients that are refractory to lung cancer, patients that are refractory to checkpoint and to chemo. If you gave them more chemo, you would expect that maybe you have a 5%, maybe a 10% at best response rate. We're getting about a 20-25% response rate. So we think that the drug is a good candidate to go into a registrational trial next year. In addition, we have an arm of the company that uses a form of AI, where we have another Nobel laureate involved with the company, Michael Levitt, where we're in the dead center of his life's work on drug design using computers. When he started to do this originally 30 years ago, there wasn't enough computing power to do this, but we take the fundamental equations of quantum mechanics and calculate how tightly a molecule will stick to its target. So we have uniquely high ability to calculate affinity for targets, which goes to the issue of how effective and how much side effects you're going to get from a drug. So those are the two arms of the company. As I said, I'm delighted to expand on it in the future. We were in the market for $50 million, and we have Larry Ellison as an investor, Tom Hill, a co-founder of Blackstone, and that's a hurry-up summary on it.
No, that's great. Yeah, actually, funny you mentioned about the phantom drugs because one of my investments was in the company, scientists from Hopkins, that what they were doing is they were actually taking the list of the phantom drugs and they were doing the DNA testing. I mean, they were using the database of 2 million different full DNAs and see how that changed the actual outcome of the usability of that drug. But they're out there, and I'm pretty sure that there's multiple people trying to figure certain things out.
It's Pete Thurlow. I think this is I don't want to say common, but it's something that's done in the industry. I think that Celgene made a lot of money on the thalidomide. I think they repurposed that drug and
There are a lot of repurposed drugs, thalidomide, Viagra, and sometimes you need a biomarker as you had with Herceptin. So
that's good for your story.
About repurposing.
Sounds well. That's very, very much interesting. So I'll go back to Stephen, and then I know that you guys were having nice conversation earlier about AI, and I don't want to repeat myself, but hey, the AI is the bigger revolution here in pretty much everything that we do. So I wanted to ask Stephen about the usability of the current state of AI in healthcare. How's that going to help? And then do you see any companies that are actually taking advantage of AI?
So you're asking me what you've recited, and I want to answer that directly, and I want to illustrate that so that it's very digestible and comprehensible for all of us. For those that heard very brief interchange about an hour ago, AI is a significant event in every regard. And I'm a healthcare guy, and that's what I really understand and know, and I'm going to limit what I have to say in that regard. So in the healthcare space, AI is a very big thing, and there are many philosophical issues, operational issues that surround it: regulatory approval, utilization, patentability. And what I wanted to use by way of example is to talk about reimbursement, because AI is replacing medical procedures and protocols, and the question becomes, how does this affect reimbursement codes and the ability to have a business that can collect revenues? Because I mean, the technology works great, it's got to be able to be reimbursed by the insurance companies, by Medicare, Medicaid, CMS, the federal agency that deals with these issues, needs to deal with it. And the answer is that when you get an approval for a medical device or a medical protocol, the approval addresses itself to how it's applied, and addresses itself insignificantly, at least for the moment, to how it does it and how it got there. So a good example would be remote patient monitoring and critical care monitoring. In the old days, you'd have people sitting at a machine watching pulse oximetry, heart rate, blood pressure, other medical indicators. They would form a conclusion, a pattern. The MD would then say, this is the condition of this individual. He's moving into a cardiac event, he's moving into a respiratory event, he's moving wherever he's moving, and they accomplish it that way. Today with AI, that's all done by a machine. It's monitored way more effectively, way more accurately, way more methodologically, way more precisely. But at the end of the day, we need a medical human being to sit on top of the pile and say, this is the medical conclusion, this is the solution, this is the action plan, this is the medical therapy, this is the treatment protocol that needs to take place. Now, the reimbursement is going to remain the same. What could ultimately happen as things evolve is people will come to recognize that AI-related machine learning, et cetera, enables this at a very cost-effective level. And ultimately, CMS may turn around and say, well, the The reimbursement was $161.88, and we're now going to adjust this like they did to the cardiac world 10 years ago. We're now going to adjust this down to $87 because it doesn't cost you that much to get it done. But that's not really where it's all going. They try to focus on the efficacy and the performance and the applicability and the suitability of the protocol or the testing means and say, does it work well? We're going to reimburse you. So in the main, probably safe for a while, but downstream, we could be looking at rate adjustments, at reimbursement rate adjustments for this. That would generally go across to insurance companies, the government, so on and so forth.
If I may, I'd like to chime in on AI because I think that there are places where it's great, and I think there are places where it has limitations. So one concern that I have looking at the U.S. Neotex is an Israeli-U.S. company with clinical presence here and a lab presence in Israel. In Israel, the entire database of treatment is available to people that want to go through the database, see what worked, look at patients that got chemo 7 times versus patients that got chemo 6 times. That's not available in the United States. So eventually, we're going to be at a competitive disadvantage if we don't anonymize our data and make it susceptible to AI. Where I think AI can make an enormous contribution on looking at track records. I think it can make a big contribution in the testing phase. I think that the cost of CRO should be something that comes under pressure due to AI. And the one area where I think you have to be thoughtful about AI for its possibilities is in the drug design side. AI needs a training set. If you're a blackjack player, if AI is watching you play blackjack and it only sees 3 hands and it sees that the dealer wins with 17 on 3 hands, AI is going to conclude that, oh, gee, in blackjack, if you're 17, you're a winner. AI needs 1,000 observations of blackjack to have a really accurate sense of how to play the game. In the world of drug design, internally, we think that at Neotex, we think that the current state of drug design, the number of observations that are required to make the AI truly accurate are too small right now by a factor of maybe 10 to the 7th, which is 10 million for non-math people. So that's a limitation on AI. Eventually, they'll get they'll get it up to snuff. What we do in Neotex is we use the fundamentals of quantum physics to figure that out. So that's a different form of artificial intelligence to figure out what might work, and we find that we have accuracy levels that far exceed what's available from AI right now. So that's
just a couple observations. It seems like when you've got something that's super smart, you need the data, and a lot of the data that is actually produced is prone to human error, as Tom Farr has pointed out time and time again when he's spoken at our events, right? So that data's got to be cleaned up. It's become at a specific level of quality. So that's one issue with the AI in terms of, as we're saying. Diagnostic issue is that insurance reimbursements haven't been worked out yet. And so getting paid for your AI, it has not been worked out, right? Because there's no insurance reimbursement for AI right now. Is that correct?
So that's a difficult play on words, because the reimbursement codes are based on the efficacy of the protocol. So I want to use the remote patient monitoring as an example, and I want to comment on what you said because I don't disagree with that. So we have a functionality. We're monitoring a patient remotely for his vitals to determine a respiratory, cardiac, or other condition. So we make that analytic, and the doc makes that final call and says, all indications are you're heading for a heart attack, you're not heading for a heart attack, you're heading for a stroke. That medical protocol, that reimbursement code for that diagnostic, for that remote patient monitoring, for that series of monitoring events, whether it's a day, 3, it's all got billing codes. The CMS doesn't care how you got there. The doc is going to make that determination. He's going to put his bill in for doing that work, and it's going to be billing code CB 2842.
And what's going to be the AI carve-out?
So it's blind to the AI. So the answer is, if you had a paralegal or a nurse practitioner watching those machines, those 5 machines, and writing down the results every hour and adding them up and dividing by 74, or you did it by machine learning or by other means, and you aggregated it, and the doc sees it, the reimburser doesn't really care what the sub analytic is. He just deals with the code.
So are you saying that it's good from a cost savings point of view because it's less labor involved? Or it's
Yeah,
actually generating revenue?
so the answer is they're firstly reimbursing the functionality. Now, 2 factors in what you're asking. The AI is typically way more accurate in a remote patient monitoring situation than human observation and human summary, because it's more methodological, and it does very well with details, and it aggregates and it concludes when it's got the whole picture. Okay, and yes, there are gaps when it doesn't have a whole picture, to his point, but it's also way cheaper to get accomplished, which is why I said ultimately CMS looks at efficacy, performance, and those types
So
of.
it's a cost savings on the revenue maker.
It's a cost savings, and then CMS is going to figure out in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, I don't know when. Hey, gee, why are we reimbursing at $161? It doesn't cost that much anymore. Let's reimburse at 88. That's my opinion of.
It's a proven rule of technology that all technology goes to zero cost software. I mean, look at you pay for spreadsheets these days. Right, Google has free spreadsheets.
It goes to a lower cost.
I mean, so we had Bob Bozeman speak from SB Angel, that's Ron Conway's group,
Right.
like 10 years ago, and said, all software just becomes infrastructure, and then you don't get paid for it anymore because it's just assumed.
I think.
But there's no doubt that the value is fantastic.
Well,
What people are going to pay for it, I'm not sure.
can I chime in for a second?
Of course.
So one of the things that is an area of AI that I'm aware of is there are companies out there, if you're an orthopedic surgeon, okay, and you decide that your patient has to get an MRI, okay, there's AI out there that says, okay, answer this list of 17 questions to determine whether you should get the MRI or not. So, and it starts with important questions like, is it the left knee or the right knee? And, things that are pretty mundane for the nurse practitioner, but nevertheless, now you have a record, okay? Now that physician so once he has signed off on that checklist, that's being integrated into the insurance, the assurance approval, okay? So they know it, so now the physician has written a script that he knows is going to be approved, and he's just upped he's upped his practice by 20%. The insurers will pay for that form of AI.
I'm not totally up to that. I hear what you're saying. I'm not in full accord, because that aspect of AI is not well developed for orthopedics. I get the point you make.
It's being developed.
I'd like to refine that.
And I actually heard about the development of it, but I don't know where it's at.
Yeah, so I'd like to refine, I'd like to give you my perspective on that. Not that I'm disagreeing, give you my perspective. I don't think that AI has landed in such an extensive way that it gets into that process. I still think that an orthopedic issue, depending on the nature of the issue, is going to get diagnosed in a conventional fashion. But if it's a gray thing and it requires further analytic or further review because it's dubious and what's been the history, then it may transcend into an AI-related analytic database. For instance, years back, dermatologists would look at a cancer on the skin and say, "Oh, that's definitely cancer." Then they had a database of 1,000 pictures, and they go click, 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 click. Oh yeah, that's definitely cancer, or it's not. And now we have AI, and the guy takes a picture of the thing and feeds it into the technology receptacle, and he gets an answer and says, definitely. So, it's evolved.
There's actually a guy from Harvard who's working on that right now, and he's been funded $80 million out in Silicon Valley. And all he has is he uses your cell phone, and it just scans your whole body if you wanted to, and it'll tell you if anything on your skin or your eyes predicts you have a disease.
Marty, it's absolutely going that way.
Yeah.
And, I get my daily readings. I get my biotech readings, my device readings. Every single issue of Medical Device Daily has at least 1 or 2 AI things. And what I wanted to say in summary, but did not want to disrupt, and you did that well, keep the conversation on topic A. in 5 years, we're gonna have 70-80% of healthcare procedures penetrated where AI can be of beneficial value. It will have penetrated. It's moving that rapidly.
So, and again, this gets back to what the status of healthcare is. So there's dramatic cost savings, I think. And I'll give you an example. Radiologists, they look at X-rays, right?
It's
There
a
was
big
a
area.
migration of radiology to India, right?
Big
Doctors,
area.
so you're here in New York, a bunch of X-rays are taken. All the X-rays get sent to India at nighttime. In the morning, you get all the X-rays back, right? So and that's called rationalization of labor, right? So I ran a large group at a large bank that all we did was rationalize labor, and we sent out 50,000 jobs to India, Philippines, Costa Rica, right? It was great. And then what happened is that once we took those jobs out for people who were like taking out auto loans, et cetera, we found out that we actually didn't need those jobs. We replaced everybody with vendors who we had offshored. And I think what's going to happen in AI is it's going to displace a lot of these guys who are offshoring labor. Like AI will be able to read the radiology, the X-rays, and then come back to the doctor who's licensed to practice in New York, and then we'll be able to approve and say, yeah, he's right, you know, et cetera.
You're
So-
absolutely correct.
So the American bureaucracy will still be in place, and that's the challenge for AI, is that if you diminish American jobs or reduce jobs, are they gonna come back and say, well, I'm just gonna create a new job that has to be created, and you guys are experts talking about.
So what I think is likely to happen is it'll reduce, immunize, mitigate, obviate sending stuff. That all started in telemedicine. That all started as a telemedicine thing, and it's morphing from a telemedicine thing to an analytical thing. It's different from telemedicine. It's analytics. It's assembling a large volume of data and coming to a conclusion. It's going to take a lot of stuff out of India. It's going to put a lot of stuff back here, back into a database. Guys will be developing. They'll be getting venture funding to develop a database. I'm ultimately going to write a deck for a client that needs to raise capital for an AI deal, and they're going to raise capital. They're going to do that more cost effectively, and they're going to take that out of the ship it to India, get the answer back, and it's going to become
So
domestic again.
So real money is made, and I'm saying it's not real money, but real money is made on new opportunities for revenue, not for cost rationalization. And so that's what I'm asking is where's the revenue generating opportunities?
I think the area of opportunity is enhanced efficacy and accuracy and precision in diagnostics and in the human judgment factor. I think that where AI has its greatest impact in healthcare is it will improve the quality of the human analytic, rule out the human error in the judgment, make it more statistically data-driven, machine learning, synthesized and concluded way more accurately, way more quickly, with ultimately greater efficacy, and it's going to improve the quality of the diagnostic. That's my perception. It's not my perception. If you read what's going on, I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm a little bit focused differently to the extent I have a front row seat at Neotex. I mean, there are 20,000 drugs that people take. Okay, all of those drugs over the next 5 to 10 years, all of those drugs will be subject to AI and structural audits where somebody comes in and says, you know what, if we replace a potassium molecule here, a potassium atom here with a sodium molecule here, we can make it stick to the target that much tighter. So I see that's a $1 trillion idea. Okay, and Draper used to say he wanted $10 trillion ideas. That's a $1 trillion idea because all of the majors are going to be in a position, they're facing a patent cliff. They want to reinvigorate the drug. If they have the branding of the drug already in place. So if they can create a next generation drug with artificial intelligence, whether it's calculating affinity using quantum mechanics or looking at the Israeli database to see what's most effective, they're going to do it.
So getting back to something Fred Nazem has said, it's kind of going to realize that personalization, that we've been talking about for 10 years, where you can actually get the right dosage and the right,
Yeah, that's personalized medicine.
Right.
So
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You're not talking. Okay, let me start again. I came in late, and I'm the former CEO of the National Foundation for Cancer Research, which funded what we're now talking, what you're talking about, but are not talking about, because it used to be molecular profile. It's now genomic sequencing. It used to cost $900,000 a pop. to do a molecular profile of a patient to see what mutations that patient might have that might be causing the growth in the endothelial growth, in other words, cancer. It's now sequencing. We can do it for $200 per month.
Nice.
And so what you're talking about is not, you're talking about artificial intelligence. We can provide sequencing. Grail does it. Foundation Medicine does it. So many biotechs, so many hospitals to patients where they can take a blood test and identify circulating tumor cells in the blood long before it becomes a cancer or a tumor. And we can treat the cancer by killing that mutation. Herceptin, for instance. There are drugs for pancreatic cancer, glioblastoma. But that's not artificial intelligence. That's because we've got the genomic.
Absolutely correct. It's, the genomics is what, there's
That's
two
precision
components
medicine.
here.
That's the diagnostic.
That's a different.
Diagnostics and treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not treating the symptoms. We can diagnose, identify the cause of the cancer and other genomic diseases like COVID-19, and that all came about through mRNA research.
That's absolutely, they work in tandem, it's a different silo. The genomics is a totally different silo, but it works in tandem with the AI. So ultimately,
Exactly.
can I try to link it? May I just make a comment? I think that what you're saying and what I want to say to you, and I still haven't had a
Camera's
chance to
here, guys.
respond. Sorry, apologies, Mr. Camera. The silo of genomics and the silo of AI are interactive and they facilitate each other. The ability to look at a droplet of blood and identify in great detail what's there, that's genomics, and that's a combination of AI intelligence doing a super fast analytic on the droplet and saying, this is the condition. So that is a combination of genomics and AI working in tandem, if you agree with me.
But do you know what % of doctors in America today are trained in genomics?
Oh, zero.
Less than 2%. So no one is getting these diagnostic
Benefits.
diagnostics until it's too late. Until they get to MD Anderson, or they get to Mass General, or they get to Memorial Sloan Kettering, and then it's too late. But you know, yesterday I heard a fellow talking about the Spanish flu. When that was identified, viruses had never been discovered. They didn't have a clue about what it was.
Or analyzed.
Much less. And then mRNA. The reason I'm saying that is because the National Foundation for Cancer Research funded the research at MIT to discover mRNA. The COVID vaccine is based on that mRNA research done by 2 Turkish scientists in Germany with scientists in America. That's no, not Moderna. That was done by Moderna was funded by DARPA. This was funded by Pfizer bought BioNTech. And the point being, it's happening. We are reinventing medicine. But think of law. When I was in law school, I don't think I went to the library once because MeData and West Publishing gave me free access to Nexus Lexis and then they forgot to turn it off for 3 years. But the point being,
Special.
just as the law, and I never practiced, I went into the nonprofit sector, but still, the point being, the gap between science and medicine is huge, but that's also where family offices could play a huge role in making it work. Because the research is there, it's happening, but guess what? It's been met with a deafening silence because no one wants to invest in it because they figure where's the return.
A lot of it's
Well,
bureaucracy,
no,
right?
to your point, I think that when a company is now developing a better way to analyze a database and enable a correct conclusion from a blood sample or enable a correct conclusion from a cardiac exam or something similar, I think that's a wonderful opportunity for investment. And in a certain sense, it's been de-risked because we know that the end use application has a market, has a reimbursement code, has a place in the medical world, in the protocol, in the application of it. And we're just arriving at a better way to execute that protocol.
You're talking devices and 510Ks, et cetera. I'm sorry. I've been in healthcare quite a bit. You make it sound so easy. What about the FDA? I've been in drug development.
Thank you.
Okay, an example.
You're talking about treatment. You better be tuned in to invasives and what you're doing. Quite frankly, it can't be as easy as you say.
It's years of approval, right? I mean,
Yeah, so-
and bureaucracy.
Well, let me give you an example of how that changed.
Yes, please.
We set up a thing called glioblastoma agile. It's a trial. Working with Al Young at MD Anderson, who
I
treated
didn't
Bill
get a
Biden's
chance to
son,
say what I wanted to say.
Ann Barker, Paul Webb Cavany. Actually,
When did you set it up, how much did it cost you?
we raised hundreds of millions to do, excuse me, as a charity. We did that, but I'm telling you,
I'm gonna ask that we have a table this, because I only have 5 minutes left.
Can I
in this
just
panel.
comment on the regulatory side? I think
Yeah.
that's a very,
Good.
I think
Since you're
that's
one of the
worth,
panelists.
pardon me?
Since you're one of the panelists.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the regulatory to the gentleman with the blue sport jacket. I don't,
Kevin McGovern.
Kevin, I wanted to comment on the regulatory side briefly, and I didn't cover the regulatory side, but I'll touch on it a little bit. It's not as black and white. From the regulatory approval side, we have broadly short-term 510Ks and some longer ones, and broadly PMAs, which are,
Devices.
we have devices and we have phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 type things, which are longer term. So the FDA looks at this differently than CMS and the reimbursement codes. It's a horse of a different color. So they're going to say on a 510K, is this a substantial equivalent? Now, the scope of the substantial equivalent discussion is way more broadly footprinted than the scope of it does the same goddamn thing. They're going to look at mechanism of action as opposed to in a patent. They're going to look at how it gets there, why it gets there, what physics, safety, what physics mechanisms are taking place. What might have been a 510K may not be a 510K with an AI, and what was a PMA might be a 510K, and the 510K may drift into a PMA or an abbreviated PMA or a longer 510K. So it's not black and white.
Violently agree.
Thank you.
Wait,
It's good that we agree on something.
super quick.
We got another question.
Yeah,
Andrea.
super quick comment. Elon Musk was one who said, businesses won't necessarily lose to AI right off the bat, but businesses not leveraging AI will likely lose to businesses that are. So
Absolutely.
against the backdrop of all that was shared here, which was wonderful, I have been seeing companies that are trying to leverage AI to decide whether certain drugs will pass FDA hurdles, whether it's select phases, as well as the likelihood of them succeeding as a company from a.
And there's a reason, because they haven't quite applied all the analytics to the clinical approval process in the way that could facilitate the clinical approval process. There's a lot of hierarchy and antiquated approach on how you got to get a clinical done. And I'm not sure, depending on the drug, the interaction and the testing protocols that are needed, that AI is super applicable to clinical testing. There are areas where it's going to be very relevant, areas where it's not going to be relevant. It's not revolutionary. Where it's revolutionary is it's, in my mind, and maybe others see it differently, it's making more accurate the human factor of concluding and summarizing data, accessing a huge pile of stuff and synthesizing.
But that's the beauty of LLMs, right? And as data sets get better, cleaner, and then the.
The answer is
ability to
yes.
synthesize,
In
right?
that
That's-
regard, it's going to impact clinical protocols. In that regard, it will.
Okay, and I would just have one general 50,000-foot comment for the audience. What I've seen of the presentation so far at the conference have been advice that you give in a down market, in a tough market. A lot of in the real estate area, in the private placement area, a lot of guys are emphasizing cash on cash companies to kind of weather the storm. And I would just say at least one of the presenters, Michael Weisberg, I guess, Michael Weinberg. Michael mentioned in passing when I caught him at the elevator that this is actually a great vintage year for investing in private equity. And I would say it's a fabulous vintage year for biotech because all the VCs, your typical VC, you have a portfolio of $500 million. You put money out to 12 companies. You put out 450 million, you got 50 million of dry powder, and you're hiding under your desk because each one of your 10 companies needs 50 million bucks to take the next step, and your syndicate partners have disappeared. So this is a great moment to find companies and take a look.
Very thought provoking. So I'm giving you 2 more minutes. So my question is, have the biotech or other firms reconciled themselves to down rounds yet? I mean, because there's so many bridge rounds out there. Have people said, I gotta have a down round or?
Down round's reality, I'm sure you'll agree. It's just reality. You know, you talk to anybody at this conference who was here yesterday or earlier today, didn't listen to all of it. I mean, you can argue that the valuation rates have dropped from 40 to 70%, depending on which segments, which sectors, which areas. You know, I was on a conversation yesterday where a guy's trying to fund a device company that would have had a 15 million valuation. He's looking at 6 million on a good day. I mean, there were some car wrecks out there. So valuations have taken a huge hit. No question.
I guess the Crunchbase said that seed rounds are still $11 million.
That's family and friends. Family and friends believe.
See, yeah, that's.
You know,
I'm going to tell you down round.
But you think, Eric, you agree?
I think when you're getting to Series D, you know, to coin a phrase, discretion is the better part of valor. I mean, if you can live to fight another day, get enough money to conduct your key trials, stay in business, and get back to the upturn, I think that's a
Take
winning
the money and
strategy.
run and get to a better day.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Arthur, great job moderating.